The National Constitution Center presents Constitutional Questions with Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. Article 5, Amending the Constitution. In the Constitution, our founders created the greatest charter of freedom in the history of the world. They understood, however, that they didn't have a monopoly on constitutional wisdom, and that's why they put in place a process for amending the Constitution, so that future generations could continue to use our foundational document to form a more perfect union. The founders were themselves constitutional reformers. They were men of the Enlightenment. They believed in human progress and learning from history and political theory. They wanted us to continue to perfect their framework without resorting to revolution, which, as they all knew, was often violent and destructive. In Article 5, the founders offered us a formal process for amending the Constitution, but the founders set a high bar for doing so, to limit it to changes that had broad support. The Constitution spells out more than one way for amendments to be proposed and ratified. An amendment can be proposed either in Congress or by the states. If in Congress, 2/3 of the Senate and the House of Representatives must approve the amendment. In the states, 2/3 of them must call for a convention to approve an amendment. If either of those things happen, the amendment moves on to the states for ratification. It must be ratified by 3/4 of the states to become part of the Constitution, and that can happen either by a vote in the state legislature or by the state itself holding a ratifying convention. And now, Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch tells us more about our right to amend the Constitution.
We can amend our Constitution. People forget about that. But for most of our history, we had an amendment every 7 or 10 years. And that can be done by convention, as well as through legislative processes. And if people think sometimes it can't happen, well, the last one happened in 1992. And James Madison had a role there too, but so did a young person in college. The young person wrote a paper about an amendment that Madison had drafted, but that didn't go anywhere back at the founding. And it had to do with salaries for congresspersons and whether they could be raised in the same term that Congress is serving, or whether they could only take effect in the future for the next Congress. And this young person thought that was a great amendment, and it had been ratified by a number of states, but not quite enough to become a part of the Constitution. And then about in 1992, this young person picked it up, wrote a paper, I think got a poor grade for the paper, but managed to start a movement to get this Madisonian Amendment 200 years later adopted, and it is the most recent amendment to the United States Constitution. So there you go. We the people can, through that kind of process, still have that kind of referendum activity.